Years after the Civil War ended, and there were people alive who had been slave owners and who had been slaves. So to think back to that era, this is a different time. A great migration was occurring. Over 1 million African Americans left the South and headed north, looking for work, looking for a better life. It was against the law to educate a slave. So up to 1865, you had millions of blacks who had been kept uneducated. It's easy to control them that way. Then when they were freed, of course, well, what were they going to do now? So we had a problem here of people catching up with their skills and stuff. But people came here, came to the north looking for jobs. At the same time, people were leaving the farms. White people were leaving the farms and also moving into the city. It was time of the Industrial Revolution. People were looking for a different way of life. If we're not, we're going to move away from being a rural economy. Steel mills were going on. We had a big steel mill here in Duluth. At one time, Duluth was talked about being Pittsburgh of the West. That we were just going to grow and grow. Didn't happen, obviously, but we thought it would. U.S. Steel had a plant here, and U.S. Steel was fighting with the union about wages. And so part of what they did, part of what a tactic that industry was using to help split workers, was to advertise in Alabama and Georgia among the black workers and say, come north, we have jobs for you here. They paid them less, but a job was a job, so people came out for it. This created a certain amount of tension in the community, that as people were fighting for their wages and their jobs who lived here, that other people were coming in and working for less. Also, other people were color. There's another thing around that. So that was going on. If you saw the movie Hairspray, that was about the city of Baltimore, which legislated what neighborhoods people of color and white people could live in. And that eventually, by the way, was overturned by the Supreme Court. But people were trying to deal with living together. Part of their solution was that, well, we'll just have separate. There were riots. The summer of 1919, there were over 20 race riots in cities in the United States. Charleston, South Carolina, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, Elaine, Arizona. But things would happen, big things, small things, and riots would happen. Black communities would usually be burned out, and black people would be killed. So that was going on too. So there were a lot of tensions. The other thing I want to say about, the last thing about tensions is World War I had ended. Economically, you know, when a war ends, there's usually quite a depression that goes on because the big orders for everything, the overtime, you get to feed the war, stop. So you had high unemployment. At the same time, people have been coming looking for work. I forget where I was going with that. I'm sorry. Okay. So as I said, we had tensions all over. Now, the lynching itself was one of these you would rather forget about it if you could. In that our police commissioner, ordered his police guarding the jail not to use bullets. He wasn't going to shed white blood or blacks. He didn't say it nearly as nicely. But the police force did their best. But of course, there were maybe 20 of them, and there were 5,000 to 10,000 of us. So, when I started on the Clinton Jackson McGee, really, there was a group of people, about this many people, who got together one night and said, we ought to at least have a plaque on the wall of the building. It's the Masonic building now. There's a religious group there now. But So could we get a plaque on the wall just so people would know this is what happened here? And we started meeting, I think, monthly to talk about it. And I think in terms of my growth, okay, I'm old enough that in the 60s I was in high school and college, was involved in civil rights movement. And I sort of had stayed involved much of my life. But I've really learned a lot these last 10 years of, about myself and about race relations. In that I think I started this work as a white person, kind of as a missionary. These three young men were hung, and their lives just obviously destroyed. What could I do? It's a black problem. How could I help them? So I was the white man coming to help them. And probably, it took me about a year, I'm kind of slow, to realize that, you know, this is not a black problem, this is a white problem. Who did the lynching again? And who had, you know, so it helped me look differently at whose problems, you know, there were. It was the dominant culture, the dominant looking person, people who look a lot like me, who did that. As you look at, I believe, as you look at today, lynchings continue to go on, but they look a little differently. Yeah, the young man who was dragged in a pickup truck and killed, the modern form of the lynch. Chasing people across, through neighborhoods and across freeways as they get killed by cars. It's another form of lynching, for example. And it can be done by, once again, by the dominant culture. And some other time, if I came back, I'd love to talk about the whole issue of white supremacy. And the fact that I think, as I probably could tell from the beginning of my speech, that I regard our country as being pretty systemically set up to continue racism. But that's the time to talk for the time. My time is almost up, but are there any questions? Thank you very much. Sorry. Yes.
Have any? I mean, lynching is not just a Duluth thing. That's a part of the U.S. history that
Yes.
It's important not to forget. I'm just curious about what other cities have done in regards to their past to recognize this as a learning experience.
Well, we are way ahead of the nation, and we've been recognized quite nicely. We're actually in a book that National Geographic did on memorials, and you won't find very many to the lynchings. We're one of the few. I was just speaking with Rich Rusk from a group in Georgia called Moore's Ford. Two couples were shot and killed on a bridge and thrown over. This happened though just in the 40s, and there are still people alive who did it. It's hard to prosecute that way. But the groups are trying to put together memorials, plaques at least, on bridges or whatever. We're a very unique one. So thanks for that question.